on Monday, we spoke to 4 players. We spoke to Josh Preeb, Samaj Morgan, Jyaire Hill. Excuse me. And why is the 4th guy escaping me?
KG?
Kenneth Grant. My God. It's been a long day. A lot to sift through there. In some ways, guys that we haven't seen a ton from yet. Josh Preeb played his football at Northwestern. Jyaire Hill basically took a redshirt year last year. He's probably your number 2 cornerback. Samaj Morgan, kind of a gadget guy last year, now is going to be a little bit of everything. And then, the most proven guy is Kenneth Grant, who kind of the main thing he talked about today was that, the focus has been improving his conditioning. He's a guy that played, 25, 30 snaps a game last year. He wants to be on the field for probably 50, 60. Michigan wants him on the field for that. And I think it's kind of emblematic of, and maybe this is where we start, like this roster as a whole is that, yeah, we think they have guys that can play, but how do you react to having much more of the world and much more of, make or break your team's success on your shoulders? And I think Kenneth Grant is kind of maybe one of the biggest names in that because he single-handedly changed the national championship game. Can he do more of that now? Can you do it for 20 more snaps a game? Are you going to be gassed in the 4th quarter? I think, it's a little bit different for him because he's a defensive lineman, but I think that's kind of a through line for all these guys. How much more can you handle?
I agree. And it's twofold because one, you do have a lot of guys that didn't have to do as much in years past and are going to have to step up into bigger roles. But secondly, these are really hungry players that, want to be in that role. We've talked about it in the past, but, Kenneth Grant is now going to be a full-time starter. He started 5 games a year ago, but, he wants to be, a big piece of this defensive line. He was last year, but an even bigger piece. He played just under 27 snaps per game last season. The Michigan defense was on the field for 59.2 snaps per game last year. They did a really good job staying off the field, getting off the field, and then the offense did a really good job possessing the football and sustaining drives so that they didn't have to come back out there. So I would guess that number goes up this year. I would guess Kenneth Grant doesn't have to play 60 snaps per game, but I would guess that he will play close to that in maybe some game. Who knows how something will go. And if they need him to be out there with less depth and a heightened level of competition in the regular season schedule, then it sounds like he is at least attempting to be ready for that. But it seems like they're building a little bit of depth there. I thought it was really interesting and encouraging as well, his comments on how much they're prioritizing getting pass rush from the interior, collapsing the pocket. He said he was talking to some of the quarterbacks who said, yeah, when you guys collapse the pocket from the interior, it's actually the hardest because then you don't know where to go. They got to either, roll to the right, roll to the left, or it'll rush them and they'll make a mistake. So he's understanding the importance there. And they did a great job rushing from the interior last season. That was a huge emphasis that Chris Jenkins set the tone on starting back last January when he said, we want to obsess over being better as pass rushers from the interior. And they did that. They upped the numbers. Don't have it right in front of me, but I think close to 10 more sacks from the interior than the year before. So I think that's an emphasis again. And with him and Mason Graham and Rayshon Benny, who Kenneth Grant said is looking very healthy and hasn't complained at all about any pain or anything like that coming off the injury he suffered in the Rose Bowl. They got the horses to do that.
I thought there was an interesting amount of, I don't know if social media backlash, but we'll say discussion. I had tweeted out that Kenneth Grant says the offense gave us a run for our money. The offense gave us a run for our money the other day. Coach Wink got on our ass about that. And I was kind of surprised by the amount of people who are like, I don't know what this means. Does this mean that the defense isn't as good as we thought? Should I be excited about the offense? And my response to that would be, I ultimately think that you want to hear about push-pull and back and forth in fall camp. It's the whole iron sharpens iron thing. We know the horses they have on defense. We know the talent that they have on the offensive side of the ball. We know the questions they have on the offensive side of the ball. And again, over the course of a 5 or 6 week camp, some days you're just going to drag ass. Other days you're just going to get beat. Other days you're going to completely dominate. And I think ultimately when you look at, what does it mean when you hear that the offense is ahead of the defense or the defense was dominant this day? I just, based on what we've heard, each unit has kind of got the best of each other at times in this camp. And to me, that's the best case scenario, because a lot of what we heard behind the scenes in spring ball was that the defense was way ahead and the offense had some struggles. So to me, I'm not pushing a narrative that, Michigan's offense is elite because it had a couple good days against their defense. But to me, that's an encouraging sign.
It's like when you're watching a spring game and there's a big play on offense, everyone cheers. But if you're also a fan of that, the team, you're also a fan of the defense, and it means something bad happened for the defense, and vice versa. If there's an interception, it means one of your quarterbacks threw an interception. So it's kind of how it goes until you're facing someone else in a different colored jersey. It's just the way it goes. You want the offense to be able to win some of those battles. And Kenneth Grant was asked today, is it 60-40, the defense winning those? Is it 50-50? And he said, no, it's around 50-50. And I know that he mentioned that the other day, Wink had to get on their ass. And, Quentin Johnson said last week, the offense got the better of us on, I believe it was last Tuesday was when that happened. He said it on Wednesday. And those are encouraging when you're thinking about the offense, because that this is a really good defense and that the offense is replacing a lot. You don't want that to be the case every day, but I think it's a positive in general. And I will say, and TJ Guy said on Friday last week too, that the offense is starting to really click and it's looking like a cohesive offensive line group. The run game is starting to look like a Michigan run game. To me, that it's all encouraging. And I do think the defensive guys that get up and step up in front of the microphone are being a little modest, probably. Again, I'm not there. I don't know, but I would not take this as if the defense is struggling. I think they're having their fair share of wins as well, with the amount of talent they have over there and how positive we've heard about just the way they're playing in general. So I think they're being a little modest, but I also am encouraged by the fact that the offense is winning some of those battles too.
Yeah, and you take it with a grain of salt. I mean, some of those guys could come out and blow smoke and whatnot, and that's just kind of how this goes.
They're being good teammates, It's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
That they're saying that. Yeah.
They're not going to come out and say, "Oh yeah, we've dominated. These guys can't move the ball against us." But I just think if you're someone that's you hear that, you're trying to figure out how do you process that as a takeaway. I think it's just the push pull. It's just football. It's camp. So to me, that's where we're at there. Moving on to Jyaire Hill. Super interesting guy. I mean, I think that's the first time that we've talked to him. Did we talk? I don't think we spoke to him after the spring game where he played pretty darn well. I could be wrong there, but again, I think a little taller than I thought he was. Certainly kind of a lankier guy. You can see how he sort of has the frame to maybe grow over these next 2 years. But in the here now, it seems like he is the leader to be Michigan's number 2 cornerback. He told us that his nickname Sugar comes from the fact that he always has some kind of candy on him. And he is I believe, what did he say? A Sour Patch Kid or Gushers. That was the one.
Is that candy?
It's a sugar bomb. I don't know if that counts as candy, but for a guy who's named Sugar, I mean, that does fit, right? So it was nice to kind of, very kind of a quiet guy, reserved guy. I think he plays different than that on the field. There is a little bit of chip to his game. But yeah, I mean, this is the leader for Michigan's number 2 cornerback job. I think a lot of these other guys are kind of pushing him, like Amir Hall, like Ricky Johnson. But, going back to what Sharon Moore said a couple weeks ago, they see him as a starter right now. And you hear more about that as opposed to, nickel, where you hear that Jaden McBurrows is mixing in with Zeke Berry. Like, it kind of feels like this is his job to lose, or not just to lose. It just feels like it's his job.
At the very least, I feel like he's going to rotate in quite a bit. And I don't know exactly how Amir Hall has done acclimating himself. Josh Wallace last year coming in the summer from UMass did a fantastic job of picking up the defense, which was completely different than what he ran under Don Brown with the Minutemen out there. So if Amir Hall can do the same thing, as a guy coming in from a little bit of a lower level at the FCS level from Albany, was an All-American at that level, then, I think that he should be able to earn some snaps early on. But Jyaire Hill, I'm fairly comfortable with him there. And by the way, the nickname too he mentioned was It used to be his late uncle's. When he passed away, they gave it to him as well, and it seems like it fits because he said he always has candy on him, but he had already eaten. He'd already eaten that day's candy. By the way, the press conference was right around 9 a.m., so he already had some sugar in the system, or sugar in the system. But I really liked, and like you said, he doesn't talk a lot, a little bit more quiet. It was very similar. I interviewed him last summer at an event, but yeah, this was his first press conference as a Michigan player. So obviously somewhat intimidating, not that the media contingent is intimidating at all, but just stepping up there.
Yourself.
Yeah, I thought he did a good job. I thought that one of the positives from his comments to me was, just about last season where he came in, he was the second highest rated commit in Michigan's 2023 class, just behind Eno Etta, according to the On3 industry rankings. He played early, double-digit snaps in the first 3 games. Didn't play against Rutgers, saw some time against Nebraska on the road, made the 74-man travel roster, and then didn't play again the entire season. And that could be frustrating, but he got his red shirt, and he said, if I was on the sideline, I was on the sideline for a reason. I had to learn the playbook, had to get better, and that's how he took it is, hey, get better. He went to the coaching staff after last season. He asked them what he could do to see the field. They said, you got to pick up the defense a little bit better, follow around the leaders like Will Johnson and Makari Page. And from all indications, he's kind of been following around Will Johnson. He's adopted his pre-practice stretching routine. He is, taking care of his body in a similar way to Will Johnson, maybe other than all the sugar that he's eating. But, so he's grown up a little bit. Will Johnson said last week that he's more reliable. He's where he's supposed to be. He's understanding, the concepts of the defense more. So those are the big things for a guy with that physical ability, because we've seen the physical ability like in 2 straight spring games now where he's flying all over the field, making tackles, which is really nice to see as well. He's a little bit slender, but he's pretty strong and, a little more wiry and has contact courage. So I'm very interested to watch Jyaire Hill early in this season. And I do think Michigan has enough at corner overall to get through this year and have a successful season that somebody will develop at some point. Again, you have a tough schedule early, but somebody will develop to be that nice complementary piece to Will Johnson.
And he's going to get tested early because nobody is going to throw at Will Johnson, right? So he's going to have opportunities to make plays. He's going to have some good one-on-one. I mean, if we're just putting down on paper like a top 3 or 4 most important players in that Texas game, he might be one of them when you just look like from a matchups perspective. So I'm excited. Part of the schedule and throwing these guys into the fire is seeing what a guy like Jyaire Hill can do. And, I think the world of his ability and, there is some maturity that comes with, all these guys at some point, you're the man. And then you're getting recruited by Michigan, who's been in the college football playoff. They've been competing for national titles. And then you get to campus and you feel like you suck because everyone's playing faster than you. The defense is so difficult to pick up. You're confident in your abilities and how you athletically measure up, but there's just so much more to it. And I think for a lot of guys, if you're able to push through the freshman year, some guys, the sophomore year, I think that's how you come out the other side is kind of a defining moment for you. And I just, that being the first time we've spoken to the young man, at least on that type of stage, I think he's got all the tools from a skill set perspective and also upstairs. So excited to see how he comes along. Samaj Morgan, a guy who has never lacked confidence, who has never felt that he did not belong on any football field with any player, freshman, senior, graduate, otherwise. He kind of comes out of the gates, and we've talked to him probably 5 or 6 times this summer at this point, including the golf outing stream that we did a couple weeks ago. And so not a whole lot to glean just from like a mentality perspective. Like, yes, he's trying to improve on anything. He went on a bit of not a rant, but, he talked about how Ron Bellamy has stressed, no block, no rock. You can't just be a fast guy. You can't just go out there and expect to catch the football. Like if your ass is going to be on the field at Michigan, you better block someone and you better put them in the dirt. And you better help spring plays for some other guys because they're going to help spring plays for you. And it seems like he's taken to that. Some other tidbits from him talked about how the quarterback competition is a true battle. All of those guys have impressed him. Whoever the starter is against Fresno State will definitely be ready for it, and that the team will, quote, be behind whoever is thrown into the fire. So he also said that each quarterback, when they throw the ball and you catch it, there's a little, I don't know what the sound he made was, but it was like a little. So he's impressed with what he's seen so far.
It's really interesting because he's very confident, as you said. He's not averse to making a bold statement. He keeps talking about this wide receiver room being dangerous. He said, that's what we're going to be going forward. Recruits are going to be flocking to Michigan and all this stuff. But then on the flip side, he embraces the culture at Michigan that you do have to block if you're going to be a wide receiver on the field. He's somebody that got the ball right away. First Big Ten game last season against Rutgers, he runs a slot fade. J.J. McCarthy hits him. He scores his first touchdown, and he made big plays throughout the year. All 4 of his touchdowns were really game-changing throughout the season in moments that Michigan needed them. And then he has the near touchdown against Iowa when he got ran down by his former high school teammate on the 87-yard punt return. So this is a playmaker that is buying into the culture, and I think he's already a leader as a sophomore. So it's a good sign. And, I think he's limited a little bit by his size, but I do think Samaj Morgan has more he can show down the field as a receiver. But that's one of the things he's trying to prove this season as well. And they're going to need him. Maybe they won't go down the field as much if the quarterback isn't going to be as good as J.J. McCarthy at throwing it like that. But, he can run after the catch as well. So his skill set may be kind of perfect for what they need.
Yeah, it's interesting, when you talk about what guys like him could mean for the guys of the future. It also kind of goes back to what Roman Wilson was. I think that he showed last year with his production within Michigan's offense with an elite quarterback that, he could make plays down the field. He could make, he could be a safety valve over the middle of the field. But when push comes to shove, he's a pit bull too. That's why, unfortunately, had an injury in camp. But when Roman Wilson gets drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers, you're like, duh, that makes so much sense. So, I wonder if that is kind of like a new sort of standard or archetype of Michigan receiver where you're this explosive guy that can make plays. You can be a gadget guy. You can do just about anything in the playbook, but also you could put someone in the dirt too. And I don't know if Samaj is ever going to be that, but he talked about how during the recruiting process, like you said, he wanted to kind of be one of the guys that helped set the new standard. So really interested in seeing how Michigan's going to use him this year. I think he has a lot more to bring to the table. I watched him play a couple times in high school. It seems like whatever, in any scenario they put him in, he made a play somewhere just in the few games that I saw. So, we've been kind of hyping him up all summer. Physically looks the part, mentally has had it up there for a while. So excited to see what we get out of Samaj Morgan. Last but certainly not least, Josh Priebe, the Northwestern transfer. Somehow like one of the veterans in the room. You've got all these guys who have been here forever, but it feels like Priebe is one of those guys that fits right in seamlessly with the Greg Crippins, with Gio El Hadi, with Miles Hinton, and it seems like, from his perspective, it's really started to come together, and a lot of what he said mirrors what we've heard in terms of the group is kind of gelling, and they are having their wins. They are having their one-on-one battles with Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham, and it goes back to what we just talked about, iron on iron. Everyone's getting better with the fall camp that these guys have had.
Michigan's had some really good transfers come in on the offensive line the last couple of years, and all of them that contribute right away and have a big impact have this common thread, right? And it started with Olu Oluwatimi, where it was like coming out of spring ball, people were saying, he could be a captain on this team. He's already leading this group. And obviously he had to kind of prove himself a little bit to the guys who had been there for a while, but he also comes in right away. And the first thing you can do to kind of earn your stripes is learn the playbook. And he did that. Drake Nugent last season did that. Same thing, goes for some of the other guys like Ladarius Henderson, who took it really seriously. I know he wasn't around last spring, but was given the playbook. And, while he was finishing up classes at Arizona State, I think was very close by, able to come into the building and things like that. So I think it's just like another example of a guy that's doing that early on here. He said he had the playbook down before spring ball, and then there were some things he had to get used to on the field as spring ball went on. But now he said, not that much communication is even needed between him and the guys next to him, just because maybe no one has to point him in the right direction and things. I'm sure they're still communicating because that's very crucial on the offensive line. But you just have a kind of a seamless transition there with Preeb coming in. And, last week we got to talk to Giovanni Alhadi, who looks in great shape and who, said he's going to go out there and dominate. I want to be one of those dogs at Michigan. Michigan sent 12 offensive linemen that have been drafted in the NFL over the last 5 years. It feels like Preeb and Alhadi are going to be two at least of those guys coming up in the next year's draft, or Alhadi if he uses another year after the 2025 season. So they're really good at guard. They say that there's a competition at center. I feel like Greg Crippen is probably the favorite. Miles Hinton at left tackle, and some other tackles battling, but it seems like they're starting to pick things up a little bit. And again, going back to what TJ Guy said last week, the O-line is really starting to click, mesh together. And Josh Preeb said that was very intentional because they've been doing a lot off the field, a lot on the field, trying to make sure they have that chemistry come the season.
And it seems like they're in good hands too with Grant Newsome, very much cut from the Sharon Moore cloth. It's one of those things where, like, when you think about what a Jim Harbaugh team was, like, they were always going to use the tight end, right? Like, that seemed like that was sort of the box that a Jim Harbaugh team always got put into. Feels like a Sharon Moore team, probably always going to have a good offensive line. When you come from a background of coaching that group, I think there's a lot of pride in making sure that the standard you set that allowed you to move up into the position that you're in remains high. And I think that, again, we don't know what the ceiling of this group is, but I think that they're going to put a 5-man group together that is going to be pretty good and maybe one of the better units in the country. So we'll see what happens with all of that. Any other thoughts on Josh Preeb? I don't really have any other takeaways from him other than just feels like a fit, feels like a Michigan guy, feels like someone who would have got along great with Trevor Keegan and Zach Sinter, had their paths crossed, at a different time, but feels like a fit. And I like him a lot.
Yeah, he probably did get along with them too when he was being recruited, which is a good sign too, right? If he has their stamp of approval. But yeah, you're right. He feels like a fit. He feels like one of those guys. And I do wonder with this O-line, like, who is the guy that's going to really get them going in those big moments. It was Trevor, it was Zach in the past. I mean, the centers obviously have to set the tone as well. So I think Greg Crippen can add that. But who are the vocal leaders? I think that remains to be seen. Obviously, we're not there, so we don't know for sure. And you hope some of those guys emerge kind of this season to build that identity beyond just what they're going to do in terms of their technique and what Michigan's calling, but the identity of that O-line that they can really ride, to victories potentially down the line here.